In this series of videos, we're going to look at the chemical processes that absorb energy in some organisms and how that energy is transferred to other organisms that cannot absorb or produce their own energy directly. Regardless of whether the organism is a producer or some sort of consumer, all organisms require a constant energy source in order to do what we call growth and development. Growth simply refers to an organism either getting bigger or using cell division in order to repair damaged parts of their body, while development refers to the tasks that all organisms do on a day-to-day basis that require energy. And together, the chemical reactions used for growth and development are what we call metabolism, or if we use the adjective form of this word, a metabolic process. Now, in the case of this plant, an easy metabolic process to look at is the absorbing of sunlight, which acts as a source of the plant's energy, while in all organisms, most of the chemical reactions that they do actually consume or use the energy that they have saved. For example, this cheetah requires a lot of energy consumption in order to run at the high speeds that it needs to in order to catch its prey. In this video, we're going to be focusing on two chemical reactions that are the source of energy for all living things on Earth. Now, if we go all the way back to the true source of energy, most of us know that all energy that is used on Earth originally comes from sunlight, but only a certain number of organisms have the ability to directly convert solar energy into a usable form. Now, technically, we haven't even gotten to that stage yet because there are a few problems even with sunlight. So the problem is because the sun is so far away from Earth, obviously 100% of its energy is not actually going to make it directly to the surface of the Earth. In fact, even the energy that makes it to Earth directly, most of it is actually lost. So the sunlight that is not directly absorbed by plants, some of that sunlight cannot be absorbed either because it is reflected back into space. For example, when sunlight hits the clouds, so even before it gets to the surface of the Earth, the water vapor in the clouds will actually reflect some of that energy back into space, and this energy will not be usable by plants, but even the energy that makes it to the surface of the Earth, energy that is not absorbed directly by plants, it's more likely for that energy to be absorbed either by the soil, so either by the ground that contains no living matter, or by water. So remember, 70% of Earth's surface is water, and if the sunlight is absorbed directly by the water, that means a plant won't be able to use it. Now, the second problem that we have to overcome is while plants can absorb the energy from the sun, not all organisms directly can. In fact, the example of the trophic group that plants belong to, that being the photoautotrophs, the photoautotrophic organisms are the only organisms that can actually utilize sunlight directly. And if we think of 100% of the sun's energy that even makes it to Earth, only 0.0023% of sunlight that even makes it to Earth is able to be used by photoautotrophs. And photoautotrophs, as we discussed in the previous video, are able to make use of sunlight using a chemical reaction that we call photosynthesis. So remember that the word synthesis is a fancy way of saying to make something, and the energy source that it uses, photo, tells us that it's absorbing sunlight. Now, photoautotrophs such as plants are able to do photosynthesis because they have specific structures inside all of their cells, and these actually explain why plant leaves are green. This structure here is what we call a chloroplast, and pretty much every example of a photoautotroph is going to have a chloroplast if it is a plant, or some sort of structure that has a similar function that absorbs energy directly from the sun and converts that energy into glucose, which is the usable form of sugar that pretty much every other organism on Earth depends on. Now, if you're not a photoautotroph, that means that you're out of luck, which means anything that isn't a photoautotroph does not have this structure here. So humans, for example, are an example of a chemoheterotrophic organism, which means that, like all other consumers that are not photoautotrophic producers, we cannot get our energy from the sun directly. We need to get our energy through consuming other organisms, specifically by consuming some sort of photoautotrophic organism so that we can eat the energy that plants actually make. So the energy that plants absorb is converted into glucose, and we can actually get this sugar that plants produce by eating them. So if we use this rabbit here as an example of a heterotrophic organism, we can use this as an example because pretty much every heterotrophic organism uses the same chemical reaction to take the glucose that they eat originally from plants and convert it into an energy source that we can use. And the chemical reaction that we as heterotrophs use is what we call cellular respiration. And as it turns out, the process of cellular respiration looks very similar to the process of photosynthesis, and that is where we take our sugar, C6H12O6, and we know that every heterotrophic organism, including humans, needs to breathe in oxygen gas. And when we take this sugar that we eat from plants and react it with the oxygen that we breathe, we convert that into carbon dioxide, which we exhale, and water that our body keeps. But most importantly, this is where we get our energy source from, by breaking down glucose in order to give us energy. So life on Earth, as it seems, is a balancing act between photoautotrophs' ability to absorb sunlight and convert it into this usable form, glucose, and then chemoheterotrophs, such as humans or this rabbit here, will eat the photoautotrophs in order to get this energy source that they made, allowing both organisms to survive. In the next video, we're going to take a more detailed look at the balancing act between photoautotrophs and heterotrophs in order to understand how the two types of organisms depend on each other for ecological balance in terms of energy production.